As the current COVID-19 pandemic continues to grip human life, a host of tremors will be felt across the automotive industry in times to come. And one of the few silver linings in this crisis is perhaps the acceleration of digitization. In that spirit, R.C. Bhargava, Chairman Maruti Suzuki, joins us digitally to shape the conversation further. Shortly, he'll be joined by Nabil Khan, editor ETRetail.com as well.
Hello and welcome to the keynote session on India Edge in a post-COVID world. I'm Nabil Khan, and the speaker for this session is such a legendary business leader that I'm helplessly short of words to justify an appropriate introduction for him. But let me try it. He's an IAS topper who joined India's first public sector car manufacturing company, Maruti Udyog, now known as Maruti Suzuki, in 1981 on deputation just for 1 year. But he quit IAS and continued with Maruti Suzuki, and rest is history. Through his vision, he not only carved India into a global hub for manufacturing of small cars, but also made India the biggest market for Japan's Suzuki Corporation. Interestingly, India is the only market where any single car manufacturers have over 50% of the market share. And he is the man who effectively crafted this incredible journey. The Emperor of Japan conferred on him Order of the Rising Sun Gold and Silver Star. The President of India awarded him the Padma Bhushan. Without much ado, I would like to invite Mr. R.C. Bhargava, the leading protagonist of India's manufacturing story and the chairman of Maruti Suzuki India, to enlighten our august viewers on India Edge in manufacturing. Mr. Bhargava, I'm pleased to welcome you to the ET Global Town Hall.
Thank you very much, Nabil, for that introduction. And I'm delighted to be able to speak to you in this webinar. India started its efforts to industrialize in 1950. At that time, we had a number of very major advantages which should have made us into a very strong, competitive manufacturing country. These included a large population and a potentially huge market, a well-established administrative structure. We had democracy and the rule of law given to us by our constitution. Reasonably good infrastructure in terms of railways, ports, electricity systems, education, including engineering colleges. Human resources in India have always been excellent, and we've always had an abundance of labor. The private sector in India had developed reasonably well even during the British times. And at that time in 1950, there was virtually no competition from any other country in the world. However, despite all these advantages, we have not succeeded even over 70 years in becoming a really strong, competitive manufacturing country. Our growth has remained slow, and manufacturing has stagnated at between 14 and 16% of the GDP. The present government has realized the very huge importance which manufacturing has and the potential for India. And they are trying to achieve what could not be achieved in the past decades. The task gets a little bit harder now because there are many countries which have become strong competitors for manufacturing investment. And we have therefore to raise our bar substantially if we are going to become globally competitive. Now, I looked into the reasons why India has failed to become a strong manufacturing country. And the main reason I find is that our policymakers did not quite understand that if manufacturing is to become competitive, it is necessary for all government policies, as well as the efforts of the entrepreneurs, to keep minimizing the cost of manufacturing. The lower the cost of manufacturing, the greater is the possibility of increasing market size, entering new markets, and becoming a competitive manufacturing country. Along with, of course, reducing cost, you have also to maintain and achieve better and better quality all the time. Now, unfortunately, our policies did not encourage this at all. In fact, the policies which were there till 1991 were deliberately designed to prevent competition. And the growth of competitiveness was not a part of policy at all. The confusion in this sector arose partly because socialism was a state objective. And it was thought by our planners and by our policymakers that we would achieve this state objective partly by using industrial policies to achieve the socialistic purposes in various ways. And this was evident from the policies which adopted, including the very large role which was given to the public sector at that time. Realization did not dawn upon these that by trying to achieve socialism through industrial policies and by various regulations relating to industry, you were actually in each case adding to the cost of manufacture. And if you add to the cost of manufacture, industry becomes that much less competitive every time. And if industry becomes less competitive, its growth slows down, its employment potential comes down, and the result is that the social objectives also do not get achieved. And this is exactly what has happened in this period, that our costs of manufacturing have remained high compared to other competitive countries. Our growth of employment has been slow. We have an unemployment problem, and Indian industry is not competitive. Foreign investors in the manufacturing sector tend to prefer other countries instead of India. Initially, they all decided to go to China. At that time, India should have been a preferred objective. Even today, when people are shifting out of China, they prefer to go to Vietnam or Cambodia or Myanmar or Indonesia. Very few are still coming to India. So what has to be understood is that we have to become a much more competitive manufacturing country. And competitiveness essentially means that whether it's the government or whether it's the entrepreneur, both have to ensure that their policies, their actions, their regulations, the way they manage their companies are directed towards lowering the cost of manufacturing and improving quality. That is what today's policy requirements are. And I think this point of manufacturing competitiveness has been understood by the present government. The Prime Minister's efforts to make costs lower were first manifested by the ease of doing business, and a huge improvement in the ranking in terms of ease of doing business was achieved in a very short period of time. Various reforms were made in the legal structure, the bankruptcy code, the introduction of the GST, the efforts to reduce black money in the economy, because black money absolutely reduces competitiveness of manufacturing. The more black money is generated, the less competitive manufacturing becomes. So those actions were taken. Then more and more digitization is coming into the economy. Digitization again helps to remove the personal factor, the discretion factor in taking decisions, and advances, therefore, the ease of doing business, reduces cost of doing business. So these have been major steps taken in these last 4 or 5 years, which were never done in the previous 65 years. And this policy of making industry competitiveness has to continue. What government has to do now is to look at all the areas where government policies are in fact leading to higher costs of manufacturing. And there are many, many areas where it will be found that directly or indirectly, the result of government policies, whether it is the public sector and the way they are managed and the way they are evaluated, is the banking sector and the objectives given to the banking sector. It is the kind of control mechanism which in some states are the way the bureaucracy practices when it relates to actual things. It is the cost of input supply to industry. If these are reduced, I think we will get the next step taken towards becoming a highly competitive country. And I see that this is bound to come, especially after this COVID thing. The other point I want to make about competitiveness is that while it's very, very important to reduce cost of manufacturing and to reduce or improve the competitiveness and the quality of what is produced, and there the role is largely of the entrepreneurs. It's also important that government policies should not dampen demand for manufacturing products. Because what needs to be understood by everybody is the rate of growth of manufacturing can be only as high as the rate of growth of demand for the products. No manufacturer can manufacture beyond the actual consumer requirements for products. You don't want to build inventory. And the socialistic policies which we adopted in the past, which included taxation rates, and taxation rates were often fixed on the basis that these products are used, and I'm talking of manufacturing products, are used by the rich, and therefore they should be heavily taxed. Those factors have also kept down demand. And it's a very difficult thing for governments to do, whether it's the state governments or the central government. But somewhere we have to bite the bullet and see how to reduce costs of manufacturing, to build up demand, to see the tax structure is not a damper on the growth of demand, and make that happen. Supply chains in India are also a critical factor for competitive manufacturing. The automobile industry has grown rapidly in India, because we have been able to build a very strong supply chain, which is reasonably competitive in terms of global standards. Now, the rest of manufacturing is suffering generally in India, because most manufacturers find that supply chains are one of the weakest links when they come to India. And that is an area where I think we need to pay a lot of attention to see that manufacturing starts, that foreign manufacturing units come to India and set up manufacture of components and other inputs which are required for industry, so that they not only supply Indian industry, but they also become part of the global supply chain. When the Prime Minister has talked of Atmanirbharta, he is basically talking of the need to build the supply chains in India. Because what we find is while we make a lot of products in India, the components and other materials which are required to manufacture are still imported in fairly large amounts. And therefore, without having local manufacture at competitive costs, at competitive prices, of those, we cannot ever get this kind of self-reliance in terms of our manufacturing industry. So these are steps which need to be taken to make this happen. The industrialists need to change their management style. The management style has to be consistent with the social, economic, and political conditions in India. It is not appropriate for Indian conditions, I believe, to follow the Western management style. I think we need to look east in that area. It's also necessary for industry and government to work with trust with each other. At the moment, there is an absence of trust. industry has to change its ways of doing work so that trust is developed. I think if we do that, and if we understand that without making India really manufacturing, competitive manufacturing hub for the rest of the world, it is going to be extremely difficult to solve our problems of poverty and unemployment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhargava, for pointing out the key aspect for India to give an edge over other nations when it comes to manufacturing. You talked about that we should have a management policy which is unique and specific to India. We should build a supply chain for the global market, and we should have a government policy which do not dampen the demand, rather encourages. Looking at the current situation, you talked about GST. Do you see an enabler of demand, or you see it still dampener of demand, or how can it be corrected?
See, our own experience has been that in some areas, the GST has been of great help to us. For example, in the whole logistics area, the introduction of GST and solving the initial teething problems has resulted in a much faster movement of our trucks and vehicles carrying cars, bringing components. That has reduced cost of operation. There has been some problems with the small industries, but that problem arose because these industries were not used to maintaining proper accounts, and they were used to doing a lot of business in cash. But as I said, if you want industry to grow, you want industry to modernize, it can only happen if industries generate enough internal resources. And you don't generate internal resources if you don't maintain correct books. And if you maintain the books correctly, then GST is not a problem. It's a very simple way of doing your taxation and filling in the forms. But you do need to do good bookkeeping.
One important
There are one more, but there are areas where I believe the GST rates are inconsistent with rapid growth of manufacturing. And I think there's a need for government to review some of these rates. They again date back to our socialist era and bring those more in line with global rates on manufacturing products, so that growth of manufacturing in India can accelerate with better demand.
One pertinent question that you raised, or you pointed, that what India edge has been is the manpower. With Industry 4.0 and COVID-19, people are moving towards automation. How do you see India placing itself as a competitive manufacturing hub? Or how can India provide an edge over other manufacturing nations in such a scenario?
As I said, Nabil, it's very important that if we are going to manufacture for the global markets, we have to not only ensure that we compete on cost, but we have also to compete on quality. And at times, the achievement of 100% defect-free manufacture, which is really what today's customers are wanting in many areas, is only possible with a required degree of automation. Because if you do it all manually, the element of human error cannot be ruled out. But the mistake we all make is to only evaluate the jobs which are created in the manufacturing industry. In fact, manufacturing creates the bulk of the jobs in the services sector. And if we look at the whole creation of employment in the economy in a holistic manner, I think you will find that the only way of doing this is by both quality and cost in manufacturing, so that volumes expand and jobs are created both in the manufacturing and in the services sector, because larger and larger volumes of manufactured products getting into the market and the customer's willingness and ability to buy those products.
You said that we should build a supply chain for global market. Can you briefly tell us which are the markets Indian manufacturer can probably look into for their exports or to be a supply chain provider?
You know, global manufacturing has become very, very competitive, and everybody everywhere is looking to reduce costs of manufacture. And most manufacturers of big OEMs, whether it is automobiles, whether it is aircraft, whether it is defense industries, whether it is even white goods and brown goods, are looking to find ways of cutting cost. These manufacturers and these products are essentially products which are assembled by the OEM. They design it, they assemble it. 60–70% of the components are bought out. So competitiveness of the OEM essentially depends on the cost and quality of the components. And if a country can produce these cheaper, then it has the potential of becoming part of the supply chain for an assembler who may be located in Europe anywhere, he may be located in Africa, he may be located in America, he may be in Australia, he could even be in Japan.
One last question, sir. What India offers that will attract global manufacturers to come and set up shops here, briefly?
I think India, as I said earlier, has a lot of advantages. The first advantage any manufacturer looks at is what is the size of the local market. And as I said, we have a huge potential local market, which we haven't utilized fully. Demand hasn't grown for various reasons we've talked about. In terms of human resources, I think the world recognizes that India probably has the best human resources in the world. You look at the big companies outside, especially in the technology area, most of them today are headed by Indians. Why have these people gone outside? Why are they not working in India? But it's not as if they are the only people who are that competent or that capable in those areas. I think in India, we have thousands of very, very competent people. Our workers in India, and I can say this from my experience in Maruti, are extremely good in terms of their ability to absorb complicated operations, in their ability to be totally disciplined, in their ability to produce at high productivity rates. So the manpower issue, which is often a big issue, is certainly a huge advantage for India. So market, manpower resources, I think these two combine to create an unbeatable combination, provided nothing is done to increase costs of manufacturing, let me say almost artificially, as a result of policy. That should not happen. There should be ease of doing business at minimum cost.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining Global Town Hall.
Thank you.
This is an opportunity for nations to reboot and relearn the basics under changed realities, as the parameters for success are reimagined entirely. Do continue to share your session feedback with us, and also please chime in with your views via social media using the hashtag ETGlobalTownHall.